There is more to the mysterious fog of Esperia than meets the eye. Chapters 1183 through to 1185 walk us through the destruction of Brook's homeland. At some point before King Reuven was crowned king, a world noble washed up on the shores of Esperia. Chapter 1185 drops this detail in passing. Brook's reminiscing about Kandel to a teenage Shuri, and his mentions that after the celestial dragon left, Kandel was bedridden for months. Brook blames it on exhaustion and the stress of catering to a world noble's every whim, and given what we know about these people, the very first thing that St. Charlos did upon his arrival in Sabodi was point at a nurse and declare that she'd be wife number 13. But here Oda deliberately withholds the details of what happened during this visit, as we get Brook's second-hand account filtered through the memory of a boy who worships the royal family and isn't going to speculate about any darker motives linked to the character of Kandel, so he's going to give the most generous read that Kandel was tired, the noble was demanding, end of story. Now, whatever actually happened, the kingdom of Esperia did recover. Reuven ascends to the throne and marries Kandel, Shuri is born, as Esperia enters what may be its golden age. Siloport is exporting instruments across the West Blue, Theatre Street is packed with performers and merchants, and the Opera House is running with the entire island being built around a massive harp rising from its centre. Even the architecture of Esperia has musical notes and clefs carved into the stonework. The criminal Molon family had tried to kidnap Kandel around this time, but they got taken out by Brook before they even got close to the Queen. The island was pretty much stable and prosperous and well defended. In chapter 1184, we see an 11-year-old kid living in a junkyard on the coastline with stray dogs. He was watching other children walk to music school while he played a violin that he'd built from garbage. Both his parents and his brother had died from starvation because the previous king was a tyrant who didn't care about the poor. This young boy is revealed to be Brook as he was chased away from the music institute. He had nothing, but then Reuven, disguised as a commoner, started visiting the junkyard because he liked the kid's music. Brook made him a stew out of grasshoppers and a frog, flavoured with curry powder that he'd stolen off of marine ships in the harbour. It was terrible, but Reuven ate it anyway, and all he could think about while chewing was comparing this meal to his own royal dinners, as he realised just how fortunate he was while this child here was eating insects for survival. When corrupted Marines kidnapped Brook on suspicion of being a drug courier for the Molon family, they beat him in a warehouse, but Reuven stormed in with Kandel and the entire battle convoy. But you know which One Piece characters who would never be kidnapped by corrupt Marines? These are the individuals who are subscribed to the channel. Only 10% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy these deep dives and want to see more, then hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon for more videos just like this. The economy of Esperia was built around making instruments. When their ability to make them goes, then pretty much everything declines not too long after. When Princess Shuri turned 15, a strange mist started to appear within Esperia. There was no explanation to it, as it just settled over the island and it sat there for 6 months. During those 6 months, it does everything extremely specific, as it corrodes the kingdom's musical instruments. Stone buildings are not affected, even the harbour infrastructure at Siloport isn't changed, it's just the instruments that start to corrode. And like I mentioned, this is the single resource that the entire economy of Esperia depends upon. When the mist eventually thickens into a toxic smog, it starts killing people too, as hundreds die. Kandel, the former captain of the battle convoy, the woman who had trained Brook in swordsmanship and etiquette, she is among one of the victims. She told the citizens that the smog would clear, but it didn't, as it took her life instead. And then conveniently, the world government comes knocking for their heavenly tribute. Esperia unfortunately cannot pay. Its primary export has been rotting in warehouses for half a year. The Queen is now dead and citizens are sick. The economy is pretty much in freefall. The world government responds by demanding 1,000 human beings as slaves. They are to be shipped to Merijo. King Reuven refuses the demand, as he tells his people that the government's armada will arrive in 2 months. He tells them that he won't hand over a single person, and the citizens panic as they know what's going to happen next. During these 2 months, Brook is trying to keep Esperia from total despair. His music rallies the population. The reason that Brook can still play an instrument when every other one on the island is corroded is because he grew up on building violins out of garbage in a junkyard. The rotting instruments are no different to him than the trash that he'd been playing since he was a kid. After 2 months pass, the world government fleet arrives. The battle convoy, which Kandel once led and Brook now commands, is overrun almost immediately. They're outnumbered by a staggering margin. Brook fights his way toward the palace alone after learning the enemy has breached it, and when he reaches the throne room, he finds Princess Shuri standing over King Reuven's body. Both of them have Domi Reversi horns and wings, and there appear to be two shadowy figures watching this, a bird-shaped shadow matching the Itsamade beast form of Marcus Mars, and an unknown individual in what appears to be Holy Knight attire. So this is how events unfolded for Esperia. Celestial Dragon visit, Kandel is bedridden, years of prosperity, but then a fog arrives. When Shuri reaches a specific age, their instruments rot with their economy collapsing, tributes are unpayable, a demand is made to issue slaves, then a refusal from the king, a total invasion by the world government, and then we see Domi Reversi and what appears to be one of the 5 elders overseeing all of this. Now it's speculation that Marcus Mars engineered the Fog of Esperia, as Oda hasn't explicitly revealed this, but Mars is the warrior god of environment, and his Itsumari form draws from a yokai associated with pestilence, epidemic, and death, a bird spirit that haunts places where people are dying and cries Itsumade Itsumade, which translates to until when, until when. It could be that Oda deliberately put Mars at the scene of an environmental catastrophe and gave him the beast form of a spirit that personifies plagues. We know that this isn't the world government's first time that they have done something like this. There's a kingdom in the North Blue called Flevance. Most people know it as Law's backstory. What I haven't seen anyone connect directly is that Flevance was destroyed by a similar structure of controlled economic collapse and the world government's involvement, which was even more provably deliberate because they knew that the poison was lethal for over 100 years before the population died and they chose to say nothing. Flevance was referred to as the White City. The island was so beautiful that visitors questioned whether if it was real. Everything on it had this pristine, luminous quality which came from a mineral called amber lead embedded in the soil, the trees, and the ground itself. When they discovered the mineral could be refined into luxury goods like paints, cosmetics, utensils, weapons, the demand for it surged across the world, and Flevance became wealthy overnight. The entire economy changed around mining and exporting a single resource. So Esperia's economy was built on instruments, Flevance's economy was built on a mineral. Both kingdoms had their entire livelihood concentrated within a single export. This is a vulnerability that makes them very easy to cripple if you know how. When the geological surveys first identified amber lead, they also identified that it was poisonous. Over a century before Flevance fell, the world government had this information, and the royal family also did too, but the profits were staggering, so they buried the discovery and let the population keep mining and refining and handling the substance that was killing them across generations. Each successive generation had shorter lifespans, as children were born sicker than their parents, but nobody was told why. By the time the white spots appeared on people's skin and the hospitals overflowed and amber lead syndrome became undeniable, it was far too late. The poison had been accumulating in Flevance's bloodlines for a century. The world responded by issuing a quarantine. Neighboring kingdoms sealed their borders and declared Flevance contagious, even though amber lead syndrome isn't transmissible as it's a toxin, and when desperate citizens tried to flee, they were slaughtered at the borders. The royal family escaped with the world government's help, but everyone else was left to die. Law managed to smuggle himself out under a pile of corpses as he was only a child. Comparing this to Esperia's toxic mist, both poisons directly target the economy of the land. Amber lead didn't affect the royal family who had access to the geological surveys. Esperia's fog didn't destroy stone buildings or harbour walls, but just instruments. Flevance is the second country in the story destroyed completely, with a single survivor who is demonized for being associated with them after Ohara. Law was branded as contagious, turned away by every doctor Roshianante brought him to. Similarly, Robin was branded as a devil child at the age of 8, hunted for 2 decades, betrayed betrayed by every group that she had tried to join. And then we have Brook, who spent 50 years as a skeleton drifting through the Florian Triangle, and Shuri was absorbed directly into the world government as memories were erased, and she was renamed as Gunko, repurposed as one of the God Knights who would one day reunite with Brook and fight against him and the Straw Hats. So these engineered destructions of kingdoms create a survivor, and the survivor is either weaponized or hunted. The world is trained to demonize anyone associated with such fallen kingdoms. The world government doesn't need to hunt every survivor individually, as the stigma does the work for them. You destroy a kingdom and label the survivors as dangerous, and the rest of the world does all of the policing for you. There isn't much framing of the collapse of Esperia in this way within the community. Everyone's focused on whether if Kandel was a secret holy knight, or whether if Mars caused the fog, or if Brook's last name is Davy. While all of these are fascinating theories, they're still all treating Esperia like a isolated case, when Oda usually repeats patterns within his storytelling. 22 years ago, the world government ordered a buster call on Ohara, an island in the West Blue. The scholars there had been researching the Void Century, and the government claimed that they were seeking to revive the ancient weapons. This was a lie that gave them the pretext to wipe the island off of the map. The truth was that the Marines were capturing archaeologists from Ohara on an overseas expedition, and they traced them back to the island, prompting CP9 to confirm that the scholars were doing forbidden research. The response was overwhelming, with the arrival of 5 vice admirals and 10 battleships, resulting in the total destruction of the island's civilian population. The Tree of Knowledge, one of the oldest libraries in the world, burned, with Robin being given a bounty of 79 million berries while only being 8 years old. They justified this by claiming that she'd sunk Marine ships, and Ohara was removed from every map in existence. Vegapunk and Dragon both visited the ruins around the same time, and Dragon vowed in front of the charred Tree of Knowledge to form the Revolutionary Army. The destruction of Ohara directly created a group that opposes the world government. Jaguar D Soul survived the Buster Call, gathered a team of giants, and returned months later to salvage what books he could from the lake. He brought them to Elbaf, as Vegapunk later travelled to Elbaf to read those salvaged books, and he continued the Oharan scholars' research in secret. This is exactly what got him killed during the Egghead incident. God Valley, also in West Blue, got it even worse. 38 years ago, the world government used this island, which was home to the Davy clan, who had lived there in secrecy for generations, as the venue for a native hunting competition where celestial dragons hunted civilians for sport. The Davy family had been hidden for 800 years. When Garling discovered them, the world nobles compared them to buccaneers, saying they needed to be eradicated. Rox's wife Eris and their son Teach were sat in cages, waiting to be released and hunted like animals. Following the God Valley incident, every record of the island was purged. The world government rewrote history so that Gob alone received credit for defeating Rox. Brook described Esperia as no longer existing, not that it was attacked. He uses the same passive erasure language that One Piece reserves for places that the world government has scrubbed from the record. Someone defeated the kingdom and then went further by deleting it from the record entirely. The name Esperia derives from the Italian form of the Greek Hesperia, meaning western lands. The Greek used it to describe territories west of their homeland, particularly southern Italy. In myth, the Hesperides were nymphs who guarded a garden at the edge of the western world, tending to golden trees that bore divine fruit. The garden was hidden and often compared to a paradise, and it was raided by Heracles. Oda named Brook's kingdom after a mythological paradise whose defining narrative is being discovered and plundered by a powerful outsider. The kingdom's name may also indirectly reference Austria, which comes from Old High German meaning eastern lands. This is the inverse of Hesperia's western lands, and Oda confirmed in SBS volume 56 that Brook would be Austrian if One Piece was set in the real world. Austria is the country of Mozart and Beethoven. The West Blue clusters islands like Ohara, God Valley, and Esperia, which suffered similar fates. Flevance and Lelusia prove that the playbook that the government uses can work across different seas, not just the West Blue. Every affiliated kingdom owes an annual payment to the world nobles at Merijo, and there's there's no real exemption process or an ability to defer. If a mysterious fog destroys your entire economy 6 months before payment is due, you still owe the full amount. The system is calculated so that any kingdom experiencing a crisis, accidental or manufactured, will automatically default, and once you default, the world government has the framework to demand whatever it wants. The world government doesn't need to publicly declare war on a kingdom or announce an intent to invade. It just needs to create conditions under which the tribute can't be paid, then present a demand that it knows will be refused. Then the kingdom will be dubbed as rebelling, and the military response becomes police action rather than an act of aggression from the world government. While it looks like the world government was being generous, with them offering an alternative, the kingdom then choosing war instead, the victim then becomes the aggressor becomes the peacemaker who had no choice. This is exactly the framing that would be presented to the other affiliate kingdoms at the next reverie. Look at what happened to Esperia. They refused to pay, we had alternatives in place, but they declared war, so we had to respond. Every other kingdom hears this story and makes sure that their own tribute is on time. So in reality, the heavenly tribute transforms from attacks and instead looks more like a loaded gun pointed at every single kingdom. The alternative demand for Esperia was 1,000 slaves. The government knew that Reuven would refuse this request. Any king who gives a damn about his own people would refuse. This refusal to meet obligations constitutes rebellion, and this is what justifies the government retaliating. This mirrors how God Valley was handled. At God Valley, Figaland Garling, a holy knight, embedded himself on the island a year before the massacre. He fathered Shanks and Shamrock with a local woman named Magnolia, and he integrated himself into the community, and then he returned with a full force of the world government to participate in the native hunting competition. When the operation was complete, he stabbed Magnolia and declared that he'd soon have a new wife. This is what is leading people to have doubts about Queen Candel, as there are a lot of theories about her true motives within the community. A celestial dragon visit leaves Candel bedridden. Years later, Shuri, the child born from Candel and Reuven's marriage, becomes an instrument of Reuven's death via Domi Reversi, and Shuri is subsequently absorbed into the Manmaya family of world nobles. The world government's endgame for Esperia includes claiming the princess. Whether if Candel was aware of this plan, or was victimized by it, or was an active participant is one of the biggest unanswered questions of this current flashback. During the Elbaf flashback, we watched Harold go through exactly this similar procedure. He accepted the Depth's Covenant, which gave him power and immortality at the cost of total obedience to Emu. When he refused to conscript the giants into a military force, the Covenant activated as his body moved against his will. His personality was overwritten as he started to kill his own people. He stabbed Jarl in the head with his own sword, and he had to beg his son Loki to kill him before the corruption consumed him entirely. Loki killed his father at his father's own request, and then he carried this secret for over a decade while the entire nation of Elbaf despised him. During the latest chapter of One Piece, we see both Shuri and Reuven, who have Domi Reversi horns and wings. Shuri has apparently killed her father, and Brook, who fights through an entire army to reach here, sees only the aftermath. He doesn't hear any conversation before, and he doesn't know the covenants exist, and he has no idea about the existence of the Holy Knights until decades later. All he sees is the girl that he helped raise standing over the body of the man who saved his life, and this appears to be the version of the story that Brook had believed for over 60 years. It's hard to believe that Brook is really that naive, especially when he sees the physical change in the appearance of Shuri with those demon horns and wings, and he just decides to accept that Shuri did this by her own choice. And it wasn't just Shuri's body that was affected too, Reuven's was. So this rules out Shuri activating a devil fruit power of her own. It seems like something was happening to the two of them. From what we've seen within the story, whenever Domi Reversi happens, whoever is observing begins to lack critical analysis skills. Maybe this is a function of Domi Reversi, but we won't really know until the next chapter, when we truly see Brook's immediate reaction following the murder of Reuven. Presiding over all of this happening at Esperia are those two shadowy figures, one of whom is presumed to be Marcus Mars. With Mars being there and Domi Reversi being present, it seems like whatever happened at Esperia was delegated by Emu. Brook is the only Straw Hat with a personal connection to a current member of the Holy Knights. He despises Shuri for killing Reuven. As we learn the full extent of his backstory, it seems like Brook is going to have a major revelation in the present. If you've enjoyed this video and want to see my theory on how Esperia could have transformed into Thriller Bark, then check that video out after this one. But for now, we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. Do you think that the world government manufactured Esperia's collapse? Is the parallel to Flevent's as strong as I think it is? And how do you expect the remaining flashback chapters to unfold? Are we going to see how Brook escaped Esperia, or is Oda going to hit us with something that none of us are predicting? Definitely continue the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next One Piece video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.